Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Donnie D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about Storefront and Warehouse. We'll get into what that means in a little bit. But first, I want to kind of talk to you about where I've been because I haven't had a Wireframe live show in basically almost about 2 weeks. So a couple of things are going on, and it's going to be really busy. October is a really busy month for me right now. But last week, the family went out for vacation. So we went out east and had a nice vacation at a like Airbnb kind of situation. Saw some nice little shops and stores and relaxed. And I did get a little bit of work done that I need to get done, which actually I will talk about a little bit today because it will be relevant a little bit. But then this week, I've been a little under the weather also. My wife originally actually was kind of sick about Monday, and then Wednesday I kind of picked it up. So I'm still getting over a little bit of that as well. On top of that, I actually have had a ear clog for the past week as well from last week, which I've gone to the ENT and I'm having a plan to correct that. But unfortunately, I'm not at 100%. In fact, I really haven't been at 100% for a long time, but more so recently than before. On top of which, I had a lot of writing going on, and we're actually going to talk about some of that writing today because the topic of today's show is about the blog post that I wrote yesterday. And it's topical because it's a way that I like to explain my thinking about how we distribute resources in our design systems, especially through like documentation. So in that way, let's just kind of get right into it because this is all about a post that I put on my blog yesterday, which is called Storefront and Warehouse. And let's go to the blog now before we move any further because the blog's been updated. Here's the blog right here. And the blog's been updated in a couple of different ways. The first way here is on top where you have search terms. Effectively, my wife was kind of half complaining about how she can't find any of my blog posts because now there's like 5 or 6 pages worth of them, which is a lot. So now there's a search on the top that you can enter a search term. So if we wanted to talk about, let's see here, we'll go like some CSS stuff in here. You get some CSS, posts, and it will highlight where we're talking about CSS in there. So that is available for people to look at. And then also there are tags now, and we're going to get into this post here, so we're going to talk about the tags. But you have tags now. So if you wanted to go and see all the posts that are talking about components, you can see that here, or you can go back to all the tags. So here are all the tags that I have here. But Storefront and Warehouse, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And instead of just reading this post, because I did write it, I'm just going to talk to you about it. And this is something that I would speak about for lots of people learning about design systems or even people who are managing design systems. This is a analogy that I think is really helpful because we have lots of different people who go to a design system resource site, so documentation, something like that, and all those different kinds of people, these different kinds of personas are really important to identify. So this is the way that I like to go about it, and this is also in the post. Imagine that you are a person who's looking for a vacuum cleaner. And that person that you are, you don't really have a lot of opinions about this vacuum cleaner, right? As long as the vacuum cleaner, remind me tomorrow, as long as the vacuum cleaner does the job of picking dirt up, it's fine, right? So that's all that I would like for my vacuum cleaners. So I go to the store, I go to the vacuum cleaner aisle, or the product aisles for the vacuum cleaners. I pick the vacuum cleaner out, I pay for it, I walk out, I go home, and I'm able to use that vacuum cleaner as I expect, okay? That's a scenario that would be nice because you have no opinions about the vacuum cleaner, right? As long as it does the function, then that's all I need, right? Now, it's entirely possible that as a different kind of person, you have a little bit more criteria when it comes to this vacuum cleaner. Maybe you want this vacuum cleaner to be red. So you go to the store, you go to the vacuum cleaner aisle, and you discover that there's no red vacuum cleaners there. And you end up finding a stock person and you ask, hey, are there any red vacuum cleaners? And the stock person checks, but ends up finding out and says, hey, if you just get one of these that are on the shelf, you can order a piece to make it red. So instead of changing out the blue that's on there or the black or whatever, you could put a red piece on. So okay, that's cool. So then they get that vacuum cleaner and bring it home and then customize that vacuum cleaner with an additional piece, right? And that makes it a lot more aligned to their visual expectations, right? But it still does the job. That's the important thing. Now, imagine that there's a third person that comes through, and that third person has a really interesting idea. Oh no, my camera's moving again. Excuse me. Okay, that person has a really interesting idea. What they want to do is they want to have a vacuum that is also a lamp, such that they could put it inside of their living room and you wouldn't kind of notice it there, right? So instead of just storing it away in storage or something like that, you could actually have the vacuum cleaner out in the open as a lamp, and then when you need to clean something, you just take it off the docking station. That makes it look like a lampstand, and you could use it around the room and clean. So person goes to the store, they go for the vacuums, and they find out that there's no vacuum like that there. Ask the stock person, hey, are there vacuums that are like that? Stock person says no, but this particular stock person's like, hey, we can let you take a look in our warehouse, and you can find the pieces that you need to make this lamp vacuum, right? So I'll show you where the lamp stuff is, I'll show you where the vacuum stuff is, and you can pick out the stuff that you will need. I'm going to show you some other constructions of how vacuums are created and how lamps are created, and you can kind of piece those two things together to make your own vacuum lamp experience, right? And that's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but if you really want that, and we don't make that at the store level, then we're at least going to give you the pieces in order for you to do so, okay? So knowing those three personas, right? You have the first persona, which is, have no real criteria. As long as it functions, it's good. Then there's the second person who has some criteria, of course, of functioning, but also of a little bit of expression, right? It's where you can do a little bit of customization. And then there's the third person who has a total novel idea, never been done before, and needs to start somewhere, okay? Now, bring that into your design system kind of organization or your maintenance, okay? And what you realize is, of course, the best case scenario, of course, is that a person comes to your design system resources, finds immediately what they need, and leaves, right? The first person. But sometimes what happens is a person comes to the design system and they find out, the thing that I want isn't really here, right? So in some cases, they'll find something that's close, and then they'll read some more documentation about that thing, and then they'll be able to customize it because it has the right API to do that, the right props and variants, all that stuff. So that's okay. But sometimes a person comes to what is effectively the store, and they don't find a stock person. They don't find the help that they need. So they grab the thing that looks the closest, bring it home, and kind of DIY it or override stuff, right? It's almost like you take off a panel off of this vacuum and you spray paint, and then boom, now it's red, right? So it wasn't exactly, blessed or under warranty for doing that, but it gets you where you need to be with very little effort. And then, of course, that third thing, which is someone who's looking for something exceptionally custom coming into a design system, they are most often disappointed, right? And that's because they most often don't find the thing that they need, or they don't know where to start by taking the pieces in order to create the thing that they need, okay? Especially in cases where these things that are in the design system are very much pre-made. It's very much meant for being off the shelf, okay? Now, there's two ways of going about this kind of thing. One of the ways that happens in terms of design system resources is that we will see the entire storefront and warehouse up front in your design system documentation, right? So thinking about your information architecture, your IA, that navigational pattern is just going to have literally everything in it, right? You're going to have, all the little pieces. You're going to have the medium-sized pieces, the atomic design gamut, the whole way. Right? You're going to see it, atoms to molecules, organisms, templates, pages. You're going to see it all shoved in to one IA, even if those things are organized into folders, right? Because even if they're organized into folders and you say, okay, well, here's, some form element pieces here, and here's some navigational pieces here, right? Well, it's not necessarily even separating that this is a piece and this is a component. When I'm saying a piece, I'm saying like a primitive or a fragment that's not really meant to be used on its own, but then you have components that are definitely meant to be used on their own. Yeah. And that kind of organizational exercise of trying to figure out, okay, where does this thing go in my IA, you can potentially harm your users by making the wrong IA, especially when a user who's walking into your store goes, I have a expectation that I'm going to find the thing that I'm looking for under Hoover, when in reality, your IA puts the thing under vacuum. So you're looking, under H for Hoover, and you don't find anything, even though the vacuum is there, it's just under V, right? And that comes from a bad IA, right? And it's very easy to have a bad IA. Right? I would say it's probably pretty impossible to have a good one, because you're going to have these three different kinds of people coming into your ecosystem to try to find something, and they'd have to be finding it through your distributed architecture, no matter how good your research is on that. I've worked with several different people trying to build design system documentation sites, talking about, okay, should it be split between design engineering? How should we organize the components? And every time that we go through this exercise, it's always very opinionated. And we still get problems of people, missing stuff, not finding stuff, not being clear about what can be used where and when. And it all comes down to, can I find the thing? So, in that vein, my biggest recommendation in all of this is probably the hottest take, and why this particular post ends up being purple instead of the other colors that I usually use for lesser takes, is that I think you should avoid the information architecture exercise for your documentation site, and instead invest in a robust search feature, okay? Right, I have search on here as well. It's another thing that, of course, I've added. But especially for the documentation sites, especially for resources that people are looking for to actually use, search should be first and foremost the way that people interact with your resources. Should not be through some documentation IA. Okay, there's a couple of reasons for that. Not just from how difficult IA is that I kind of explained already, but for another couple of reasons. One of those reasons is that you can highlight the components that a particular person needs with a little bit more thought. And I say that's in meaning, like, one of the examples I like to give about is trying to create a birthday input. And green designers will potentially choose a data input component to do that because date input component is looking for a date. Unfortunately, birthdays are not good for date input usage. So instead of raising date input as the answer for that, like if I search for, okay, I need a component for birthday, I could potentially search for birthday component, and maybe date input is not the first thing that comes up. Maybe the first thing that comes up is a regular kind of text field component, right? And maybe that suggests a little bit more to a green designer, hey, this is a better pattern to use than a date input. However, that doesn't stop anyone necessarily from typing in date input and getting date input out, right? Because that's exactly what they're looking for. But there's an opportunity here a little bit, to hopefully suggest more appropriate things than just looking through the entire catalog of stuff, right? Because again, the entire catalog of stuff is very overwhelming. It's Hick's law. That's the big problem with it, right? Because with Hick's law, the more options you have, the harder it is to choose the most appropriate one. So if you reduce the visual noise and hierarchy that a normal IA would typically have for a documentation site, and really hone in on exactly what the person is looking for through search, I think you get a lot better results. I mean, admittedly, I have a little bit more of a unique approach to this that I like to do, is instead of having a search functionality, I would consider even a wizard functionality. And that's the kind of thing that I was thinking about before AI was in the mix of all this, because I wanted to avoid people looking for date input specifically, and I wanted to learn more about what their use case was. So imagine a wizard that was like, hey, what are you building today, right? And already that's sounding a lot like AI, right? And that's true. These days, this wizard, which originally I thought of as much more of a decision tree that was kind of curated, now AI would definitely do a lot better at. But curating a wizard experience that says, hey, what are you building today? Oh, I'm building a profile page. Okay, what's on your profile page? I need to have my user enter a birth date. Okay, great. Have you considered, using this component? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, why would I use that component? Oh, I'd use that component for this reasons, right? So trying to guide users to the right component as opposed to them coming to the site to scour over it and wander, hopefully happening upon the thing that they're looking for. This is a similar kind of thing to what physical stores kind of used to be and are now. Back in the day when I would go to Home Depot, I'd have to, find the right aisle for the right product and the right bin and, kind of wander around or ask for help or something like that. And I'd, spend a lot of time there just trying to find something. And that's this wandering experience, right? Hopefully you happen upon the thing. But now, most recently, you can go on to homedepot.com, you can have the store locator find where you are, and then you could search for products in the store on your mobile app or on your mobile website, and it will return the aisle and bin that product is supposed to be in. And that will streamline the entire process of you bringing the right product home, the thing that you're looking for. But again, there's bias, and of course, again, looking specifically for that product. Now, I mentioned AI, and I think there is a world, and I was just actually speaking with someone earlier about this, that there is no public documentation site. I want to be clear about what I mean by that, because it doesn't mean that there's no documentation. What it means is that the expectation is that people aren't meant to come out of the context of where they're working, right? Whether that be Figma or VS Code or wherever they're working. They're not meant to leave that, because once they leave that, they are going to lose the context in which they're working and have to learn something new or whatever. So now in the tool where AI is being embedded, AI should be referencing docs, not the user directly. And when that happens, the AI can do the interpretation that normally a design system maintainer would be doing, right? Because normally for years prior, what would happen is that a person who's aligned with using the design system but isn't well versed in it would reach out to the design system team, ask, hey, I'm building this thing, can you help me? And you would have a collaboration because we know about the design system and how to use it, they know about their needs, and we would collaborate and figure out how to bridge that gap. But with AI, you don't really need the maintainer to doing that support any longer, because now the AI should have all the context that the design system documentation would have underneath the hood, and only expose that within the context of that designer or developer working in whatever they're dealing with right now, right? So if you're building a profile page, they can ask the AI, hey, how could I build a this profile page using the design system, using its resources, show me, or do it, or something of that nature. And in that world, documentation goes out the window, right? It doesn't exist from a person consuming it standpoint. It still exists from a standpoint of we want to still provide guidance and resources and APIs and things of that nature that are agreements, as I always talk about with design systems. We want to promote the agreements to these models such that they can use them to then inform the people using those models, okay? Does that mean that design system documentation is going away? Probably not, especially since we have things like Dropbox and Wise that did a lot of very flashy design work to kind of showcase their guidelines. And all of that is, of course, meant to get excitement. But a couple of episodes ago, it might have been when we just did audio, or maybe earlier for this show, we went over the Dropbox guidelines and kind of found out that it's not really helping anyone or guiding anyone into providing the proper way of expressing Dropbox. It really is just kind of a marketing, branding, or even hiring site. So that's entirely possible that these resources are like that. It's also entirely possible that these resources are also for other design system professionals to reference, right? So if you are looking specifically for the data input component in a design system, not just to use it, but specifically to do a analysis against it, then sure, referencing that documentation would be helpful just to get a reference of all the stuff that's there. But again, I think it's less common for that to happen than it is for a person who needs to get a job done and doesn't have the time to learn something new and really just needs to get it out the door, right? Because that's one of the hardest parts about all of this stuff, is that, again, a person jumping out of their context to come into a design system documentation site to potentially learn something new, which they don't have time for, and it would be much faster for them to just build it themselves and make it look like the design system, right? Because then they're in the context of their own work, right? And all the switch context behind, what the design system's doing. Like, I know Tailwind as an example. Like, I know how Tailwind works. I can build this in Tailwind. I'll rather use Tailwind, even if the design system isn't using Tailwind, right? So it's faster for them to iterate on that because that's what they're familiar with. If you introduce some pseudo new pattern that they need to learn and need to integrate, it takes a long time, and maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So meeting them where they are, especially through the context or a lens of a large language model and AI, I think would help out a lot. But it's also entirely possible, because AI isn't perfect, that you do get some hallucinations and other things that are inaccurate. But I think the amount of times that those inaccuracies could happen is less than the amount of times that people walk into the store, get frustrated, and leave and do their own thing, right? I think that happens more often than AI hallucinating the wrong thing. And that's because there's a lot to learn. And what we're doing in the design system space is changing constantly. and new approaches are happening all the time. You know, especially over the years that I've been doing this, I've changed my approach in lots of different things. I have another post that's on the blog that talks about how I learned that line height is supposed to be related to line length in paragraphs. I just learned that this year. Whether or not you actually do something about that, that's a separate topic entirely, because honestly, the work that I did to make that happen is quite hacky in terms of CSS. But all that to say is that I think leaning into the AI or just even less than that, just leaning into search and not doing this exercise about IA, I think is going to be most helpful. And another thing that I would really love to try, if I ever had the opportunity, is instead of searching for a particular pattern, I would love to have the opportunity to draw a particular pattern, right? So instead of me trying to figure out what is this thing called, right? I would want to like try to draw something out about what I visualize this thing to be, submit that, and see if there's any components that come out of that. In fact, there is a project that I actually linked to at the bottom of this post. Let's go to it. Called, I think, Shape Catcher. And I think Google had something like this as well. Yeah, here we go. So Shape Catcher is this thing. And what it gives you is this box that you can like draw in. So we're going to draw. And we're going to like draw an X. And what this should give me is like the close icon. So we're going to recognize. Okay, well maybe not. It's going to give me this stuff here. All right, so yeah, it gives me a couple of different options, right? So it gives me this northwest arrow thing, rising directional, multiplication sign. So it's giving me a whole bunch of different options that look like the thing that I just drew, right? So if you could take this idea and extrapolate it out to the possibility of like components, right? Where you have, you know, you draw the card component and maybe you get a card component out. We're already on this idea with this whole exercise of taking your mock-up and then generating code from it. In fact, I think I saw Design Course just did this with, I think, Figma's new MCP, and the output was very, very close. I did notice a couple of different deviations there, but nothing that was like earth-shattering. If I was to show that to, you know, anyone that wasn't necessarily in the design space, they would be like, yeah, that looks exactly the same. People who have an eye to detail, they would notice the differences. But again, it's so very close to being able to draw the thing that you want and output what is effectively the stuff that a user is going to see is pretty incredible. So Storefront and Warehouse is the analogy that I use to describe a person coming to a documentation site, if that's what you have, and how they potentially interact with the products that are there, right? And in a world of AI, I mean, you just ask and you get what you need, right? Even if it is a vacuum cleaner lamp for your living room, like it'll just give it to you. Whether or not it's a good idea or if it's going to smoke when it's in the living room, you know, is yet to be seen. That's why it's important for experts to still be in there to make sure that it is not hallucinating and not doing bad practices, of course. But I think that's the way that we should be going. I think design system documentation, information architecture is a lost cause. And I think we should be putting a lot more effort into search. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I would like to know about it because we do a lot of work on documentation, right? And again, I want to stress to this that this is not saying that documentation is completely going off the wayside. Unfortunately, AI still needs documentation. I learned about that a little bit in the last couple of weeks about how MCPs work, because it's a little weird to me, again, how we have to write for the machines now, even though they learned everything already. But all that being said, you know, it's all a matter of the way that we interface with these products, these items, right? I do want to talk about some things that are happening because I'm going to be busy this month. So next week is Smashing Conf here in New York City. It's going to be close to Times Square. It's going to be my, I think, 5th year. I have to count the badges. It's either 5th or 6th year that I'm going to be attending. And I'll be at the Lightning Talks at Figma's offices on 23rd Street in New York on Monday night to do a lightning talk. In fact, it's on another blog post that I have, which is called My Top 4, talking about my top 4 CSS properties. Which is something that I talked about here on Wireframe a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to be discussing about that at the lightning talks. And then 2 days of the conference, right? So you're going to have your Tuesday and your Wednesday, a full day of conference. We're going to have some great people here. Nate Baldwin's going to be here, who I'm going to go ahead and try to pull aside and have a chat with about design system stuff. Miriam Suzanne from Oddbird, talking a lot about CSS and typing in particular. Jason, who's at Chewy, who does a lot of typography stuff, he'll be here. A couple of folks that work in DataViz will be here. Lots of great stuff. Of course, there'll be a mystery speaker, as there always is every year. I'm very interested to know who that's going to be. And lots of good friends. So Natalia's going to be there, Adekunle. Who else is going to be there? I'm trying to think of anybody else that I know. But it's going to be a great time, as it normally is. I'm looking forward to that. And then on Thursday this week, Knapsack is going to be having Patterns here in New York City. So I'll be there at Patterns. I'll be on the panel that's at 11:30 with a couple of other design system practitioners, talking about design systems clearly. I ended up, unfortunately, missing the last one that was in May because I had surgery. So I'm looking forward to being back there again to, be in the vibe. But that'll be an all-day thing over there. And then I'm trying to think of anything else that's happening that's in that world. I don't think so. The next big thing that's happening is Converge. Converge is at the end of this month in the UK. And I just got word that it's sold out. It is a sold out conference, which is incredible. Yeah, I'm kind of a little overwhelmed now. It kind of hits a little bit because I'll be on stage, of course, speaking at Converge. I've been working really hard on the presentation. I have, some rehearsals of it that I've done already, working through some of the kinks. But the thing that I haven't done yet is actually perform the whole thing in one shot yet. So that's one of the things that I need to start doing. But I'm not sure that I'll be able to really start doing that until after all the events next week. So it's going to be coming down to the wire. I'm hoping that I don't change too much of this presentation because the last time I did a talk was at Clarity 2 years ago. And I was changing that talk all up until like the last 2 days before the talk, which didn't feel great for me. And that's always been a problem for me, I think, mostly because I do tend to be on the side of perfectionism and iteration and things like that to get more perfect and more perfect. And when that happens, you perfect some things and then some other things you lose in some of that. So I remember very specifically at Clarity when I did that talk that some of the stuff that was most new was the stuff that I tripped over the most because it was so new. So I'm trying to keep that in mind for this because this is a very important talk for me. Not only is it my first international speaking engagement, it is, of course, at a sold-out conference, and this will be the first one that will be publicly available as a video. The one that was done at Clarity is still paywalled, so no one's able to see that, not without paying through Clarity. So I've been a little bit, I guess, hindered by showing off my speaking skills in that way, or my presentation skills, I should say, because I've done a lot of panels. I've been on over a dozen panels, definitely in the last 2 years or so. But it's the presentations that it's, the spotlight on me and me conveying some of the ideas that I've been working on, especially things like mise-en mode, which I will be talking about a little bit on stage. I think probably for like maybe 10 minutes or so. But ultimately, that's an opportunity to gain a larger audience for new ideas and to collaborate and all that kind of stuff. And I'm putting a lot of weight on that, and hopefully it doesn't crush me with all that weight. So, yeah, hopefully this opens up a whole bunch of other things down the line. But all that being said, like I said, there is a lot of things going on this particular month. I still want to see if I could squeak in a couple of other Wireframe episodes while, we're leading up into that conference at Converge in the UK. So I'll be looking out, for engagement and other ideas that I could be sharing. A whole bunch of stuff that I could talk about. I mean, even just today, apparently, newsflash, Audacity is rebranding. Yeah, the sound program from a long time ago, they actually have a rebrand coming. And it's cool looking, but it doesn't look like the old one. It's not really. So that's something that's interesting. I might just make a Blue Sky post about that because I don't think there's really a lot to talk about. But anyway, there are things to talk about. I'm going to bring those things up. If you haven't seen the blog yet already, of course, go to blog.d'amato.design and take a look at the most recent posts on there. I got a couple actually because I did post something else, I think last weekend. That was design attractors, which is another thing that I think is really important. That maybe I'll make a wireframe for at some point soon. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.